So we're just waking up, okay, us two. So my name is Lawrence and this is Ryan. Thank you so much for having us today. It's really quite an honor. Thank you to the organizers and the venue, of course. Ryan and I are going to talk to you today about our minimalist lifestyle and how it's making big changes. We want to come out the other side thinking about resources in a different way and our ownership of them. And kind of think about how we can rephrase resources as common and shared for this is really why we're here. We're going to start in Zimbabwe. So this is a country that went from being the breadbasket of the African continent to a collapsing and hyperinflated kind of collapsing economy within just 15 years. So you can't spend your formative years growing up in an environment like this without it having a very profound effect on how you view resources, especially given that at one stage it cost as much as $4 billion to buy just a box of matches. Actually, I have one box here. You're a billionaire. You're welcome. So after a while, of course, the situation became quite untenable. My family left, my friends left, and I left to move here to Canada to start a new life for myself. I got a diploma in hospitality, and I got a great job at George Brown College working. But it really didn't take very much time before I started to feel this very itchy feeling and a crave for something different. So I sold everything that I had or gave it away down to just one backpack. And I hitchhiked and traveled and farmed around Canada and Southern Africa. So this journey was super impactful on me, and it made me rely very heavily on the empathy and kindness of other people. And it really opened my eyes to this amazing overabundance of incredible humans we have on Earth. And I realized that everyone was so willing to give food, give advice, shelter, and the stories of their lives. And it really made me feel like everyone is painting this giant picture together using very much the same colors. Getting rid of all of my material possessions made room for this immense wealth of personal relationships to come flooding into my life. You know, I came to Canada to escape a country in slow collapse, and I realized actually that the whole world is in collapse. My focus changed from advocating for a free Zimbabwe to advocating for a situation on Earth that would be absent of the conditions that continue this cycle of consumerism, scarcity, and individualism that kind of punctuates our lives. So travel and cultural sampling really gave me this feeling of the world as sort of one unit. And the real beauty lay in seeing pieces of myself in all the other people that I met. And one such person is Ryan, and that was a meeting that definitely changed my life.
Good morning, everyone. My childhood was a little different than Lawrence's. I grew up here in Toronto in the suburbs. I played hockey, took piano lessons. When I was a kid, I had a small allowance, so I tried to figure out ways to manipulate the system to get what I wanted as best I could. So I remember calling up large corporations and complaining about their candy. And so, then they would send me coupons so I could get more of their candy. As a teenager, I was actually sneaking into rock concerts and going on shopping sprees. When I graduated university, I had a car, I had a nice job at a big accounting firm called KPMG, and I traveled to about 15 countries. Over the next few years, I really got to understand the power of financial statements and how changing numbers can make could achieve different goals for an organization. Once again, it became clear that actually manipulating a different kind of system, the financial system, was not only possible, but it was actually kind of within the rules of the game, if you knew what you were doing. How else could large corporations pay almost no taxes by making billions of dollars, or even lose billions of dollars in just 1 year? After 5 or 6 years at the accounting firm, I decided I spent some of my free time watching online documentaries and reading a lot of books. Some that were particularly influential, The End of Work, Cradle to Cradle, The Best That Money Can't Buy. And these kinds of books started opening up my world and making me see things in a very different way. They kind of made me, they introduced issues like peak oil, fractional reserve banking, and economic hitmen, all of which were making very influential impacts on the world, but yet weren't really talked about in the mainstream media. As an accountant, I could relate to some of these economic impacts in a very emotional way. And I came to realize that I really didn't understand the physical world very well, but I could understand financial statements really well. And this, I realized that the only physical object that I had any part in producing was ink on recycled paper. And I was charging about $450 per hour to produce it. So I began to see money as an abstraction, really an unnecessary noise, getting in the way of relating to the world and its resources that are actually making our world so great and sustainable to preserve it. So, for example, we could put a price on a freshwater lake, but really, if you're dependent on that water to live, then it's really priceless, and the money doesn't necessarily represent the resource. So. And when you listen to politicians, you start hearing about growth, economic growth, and this started to make much less sense than it used to, as we're living on a finite planet with finite resources. So after a while, I just really couldn't continue at KPMG anymore. So I quit my job, I quit my girlfriend, and I traveled the world. When I came back, I got together with some environmental activists, and we started a nonprofit organization that would again try to manipulate the system. In this case, it's a very different system, and this was the economic system itself. And we wanted to shape one that would focus on resources as opposed to dollar bills.
So it's really been a long time since we've been able to feed every person on this planet. It's not for want of food, actually. We produce enough food to feed about 9 billion people, yet we only need to feed 7, yet hundreds of millions starve. And this is such a ridiculous situation that we're putting our family through. And it's really not, like I said, it's not for one of the food, it's for money. People just don't have the money to buy the food or the money to buy the land to grow their own food. We hold up the economy or the monetary system as this unchangeable. It is the veins that give life to our society. But that thinking is really an illusion, for the economy is just a set of rules that you use to interact with the resources. It is not fixed, and our current model of how we're doing things here on Earth is a little bit unfixable. This worldview really guided Ryan and I to start living a very different lifestyle, one that wasn't like the average North American, whom requires 3 to 5 planets worth of resources to sustain what is clearly an unsustainable life. And it also brought into very stark contrast what gave us personal fulfillment versus what actually grew the economy. So we started a communal house. We got together with a group of environmental activist friends. We got a 5-bedroom house with a garden, built a greenhouse in the back, invited friends over. We started experimenting with 3D printing, forging metal in the backyard, and putting solar panels on the roof. We went on these minimalist diets, like the Master Cleanse twice. And it was pretty awful. And then we had a room in the basement, in the living room where we used for our sort of activist meetings that went on there. So it was really quite a great situation. And we loved it so much that we sort of started to ask the question, well, what would it take to scale this up and make the Earth one communal house where we share everything there?
So living in a communal house is very different than my previous lifestyle in a condo, but it had its benefits on our bank accounts. If you could imagine, my rent went from $1,600 per month to $600. And by getting rid of my car in exchange for shared car services and a bicycle, I was saving on parking, maintenance, insurance. I was also managing to increase my quality of life, as I had far more interesting interactions with people in my home. I had more exercise getting to and from work. And I was living my values in a much more comprehensive way. It's important to realize, though, that our lifestyle was actually the opposite of what our politicians and business leaders were encouraging us to do, which is grow the economy. And we realized by spending less and consuming less resources or sharing them, we were having less retail stores needing our business. There were shipping jobs, manufacturing jobs, all kinds of employment that was related to a different kind of consumption that our society was encouraging. And so by doing less of that, there would be less of those things, less of those jobs available. But really that was the point. When you think about the worldview that we had, and if more people did what we did, and we only have one planet rather than 5, everybody would actually have to change their lifestyle eventually. So we might as well get started and start showing what we could do, what some positive solutions could be, as opposed to what we were being told. So our solution focused on really two main areas: access and design. This was in contradiction to the ownership, profit, and jobs that we were hearing. By designing things to last as long as possible and can be easily repaired or replaced, we consume far less resources as a result, so-called cradle-to-cradle manufacturing. Also, by sharing things, by accessing things over owning things, we need far less for a society, given that we only use most things once in a while. And then when it came to jobs, well, I knew a lot of people at the accounting firm and in my life that really didn't like their jobs much anyway. So perhaps that shouldn't be the priority in society. We had an election recently where you heard about a million jobs, but if we can make jobs, we can have people dig holes and fill them up again. But if there's no value to it, then what is the purpose? And if we look at where the technological trends are going, we could see that the technology actually helps to eliminate more jobs than it often creates by making things more efficient, using less human labor, which is the point. Which is, we don't need to work as hard, so we could reduce our workload. And if you think about it then, well, how are we going to live if we don't have any money? Well, that's when the resources come into play, because you don't need money, you can't eat money, but what you need is access to resources. So by focusing on making those abundant, as opposed to finding clever ways of distributing money, we can make for a very different planet.
So living in this communal space, as we were constantly in need of tools for things like bike repair or installing solar panels or what have you. And it was very lucky and also incredibly ludicrous that we owned all of these tools in our household. If you think about a tool, like let's take a drill for example, which is engaged actually just 15 minutes in its entire lifetime, and you open that drill up, inside you will find the story of the resources, the production used to make it. You will find pressed metal, you'll find plastic made from crude copper, mined from all over the world. We send these little boats and planes around, throwing these resources about, refining it, producing it. They get to our big box stores, we buy it, we take it home, use it a few times, ends up in our basement gathering dust. And this does an immense disservice to the resources on Earth, which are finite, and to our creative potential. It came to be that we outgrew the lecture and speaker guest series that we were bringing in as our young organization, the Institute for a Resource-Based Economy. We wanted something else, a bigger project to scale us up, something to galvanize our team and help to realize a portion of this large solution that we were so strongly advocating for. So we discovered the idea of tool libraries. These are access over ownership spaces that exist. There's 40 in the US. There was only one in Canada, in Vancouver, when we started. And they are places where you go and use the tools, just like you use library books. Take out the tool, use it for 3 to 5 days, you return it when you're done with it, and that's it. You've used the tool for its use and you don't need to own it. It actually frees you from the burden of ownership, for ownership is a burden. You must buy, maintain, store, and then secure that item so other humans don't take it away from you. And that's incredibly burdensome, so we want to release you from that. So we found this space in a priority neighborhood in Toronto, Parkdale. And this local charity, the Parkdale Activity Recreation Center, said, no problem, you can open up your location in our basement. We gathered 2,000 tools donated from our community, mobilized 60 volunteers to flip this space from a basement dungeon, and opened in March 2013 to Toronto's first tool library. And it really didn't take long. It was just under a month before Toronto started to demand a second location. And so we did open our second location in October last year, just 6 months after the first. So the tool library works just as I've explained it. You go and take out the tools, you remember everything you need, from gardening to home improvement, whatever. Now I've made it all sound very easy, but I assure you that it was not. I burned out really hard. I was just a dusty match by the end of it. Ryan burned out really hard too. I was working during the renovations of the first and the second tool library, so Ryan had to pick up a lot of the slack. My relationship almost fell apart. I was moving in the midst of it. Money was always tight. It was just kind of a difficult situation. There continue to be challenges. However, this is really the spice of life. How boring it would be if everything is just calm and amazing and swimmy the whole time. These crises sort of add a bit of the flavor of what makes life interesting to live. And even with the challenges, we knew that our goal was unifying us. And that goal is to give barrier-free access to tools to everyone. We want everyone to be able to renovate their homes, make a garden for themselves. But not just the tools do we want to provide to people. We want to give you the skills also. We want to show you how to take reclaimed wood and make a crib for your baby, or use a laser cutter to make a solar collector, or use a 3D printer to give life to these dead appliances that we have lying around our homes. Lucky for us, the imagination and the ideas exist in abundance in our society. And at this point, it's really about removing every barrier to innovation possible. One of those is money, another is tools, and in one fell swoop, we remove both. But now it's not just about the tools. See, we're interested in scaling this idea up. We want to make sort of living minimally synonymous with ownership-free access to everything.
So let's just rehash where we are. So we have 2 tool libraries now in a makerspace, and for $50 a year, you can access thousands of dollars worth of tools. What we like about it is that actually we economically incentivize people to share, because it's much more expensive to buy or to rent tools from anywhere else. So even if you don't share our worldview, you'll come to the tool library and benefit from it, because you get the same stuff that you would get anywhere else, and actually it's a lot cheaper to do it. So over time, you realize that these programs are impactful and impacting your life in a positive way. You share those stories, and more of them start to exist in society. For us, though, as an organization, we're interested in expanding not only that project, but 2 others, and I'm going to tell you about those over the next few minutes. And this is what we'd like to do over the next 5 years, really. So first, the tool library. We're actually we're talking with the Toronto Public Library to try and get a collaborative branch where you can get books in one area and tools in another. And since the Toronto Public Library happens to be the largest branch, has the most amount of branches in Canada, 99 branches in Toronto, this could really set the stage for making tool sharing a mainstream phenomenon. As well, we've already influenced other cities in Canada. Calgary just opened theirs. Halifax is opening their tool library soon. And we even have influenced people in New Zealand, and Belgium has opened up one recently based on what we've done. And those projects will influence others. So I think tool sharing is here to stay. Next area that we'd like to focus on is actually going to get off the ground probably this summer. We're actually working at the City of Toronto to build Toronto's first sports shed. So the way that will work is people will come to our wood shop and they will start cutting out the pieces for a shed. We will then bring those pieces to a public park and assemble it on site. We will then fill that shed up with lightly used sports equipment from the neighborhood, stuff that's in people's basements and garages, gathering dust, held in captivity, and free them for the community so people can play in the park. So not only are they saving money by not having to buy these things themselves, but they're staying healthy in the park and they're meeting their neighbors as well. So we want to make this an absolutely free resource that we will raise money to build. It's just really the cost of the wood that's the problem, but the volunteers in Toronto are abundant. And we'll videotape the whole thing, put it up online, and hopefully people will replicate the idea and have it spread also as far and wide as it can. The next project that we'd like to do as well is called the sharing room. So there are hundreds of thousands of condo owners in Toronto, but most of them have very limited storage space. So what we're looking to do is have a room in a condo where people can come and access things that they don't need every day, but would make their lives a lot better. So this sharing room will have, not only vacuum cleaners, but hammer drills, step ladders, painting equipment, stuff that you need sometimes. But even further than that, we'd go with kitchen equipment. So fondue kits, folding tables and chairs, bartending kits, things that you could throw a party with, or you want to try out once in a while, but you don't need to own and use every day. This, again, is a very replicable model because there's high-rises all over the world now. And this is just a tremendous waste of resources to have everybody own all of this stuff themselves and try and find ways to store it. So we think that with these kinds of projects, as well as what's happening in the sharing economy movement and the maker movement worldwide, we can make access abundance a real thing for the future and something that everybody can relate to and be part of.
Living minimally and living well on Earth requires acknowledgement of two fundamental unchangeables. One is that we share one large communal house. It's just that those who live above the kitchen are under the illusion that they own the food, and those who live above the batteries are under the illusion that they own the energy. We are 30 generations away from common parents, going backwards. 30. It's really short, really wonderfully connected, and any world that we build together must take into account this immutable reality. Two, if you think of a tree, these are wonderful organisms. They provide shade, the oxygen we breathe. They control soil erosion. They have habitats for hundreds of species. Yet that tree, in our current economic model, is only valuable were it to be pulped, papered, and pressed. The value of these resources is only defined in their end product. And when this practice has led us to these unprecedented crises that affect people and our planet, we want to challenge our perceptions of ownership and our relationship to our resources on Earth. And that's our call to action. Thank you.